my student's project also came out of a class from the fall. It was my first time teaching COM 210, and all of the groups had to complete a research project. And I know in the past, groups have done a qualitative and quantitative project. In this class, they got to pick the path that they went down because they wanted to go down because they were doing activities in both areas. So this particular group, their research project, they chose to do some quantitative methods, and as many of you know, at the level that they're at, that can be somewhat challenging. Math can be very confusing and difficult, but they really pulled through on that. They submitted as a paper presentation, or accepted as a poster presentation. And I don't know the exact acceptance rate to this undergraduate honors research conference, but it was very competitive. I think it's amazing that the two things that we did submit both have been accepted. I think that's a really big deal. They'll get a chance to go to a luncheon where awards will be given out for top posters, top presentations, top panels, and get a chance to do a graduate student fair as well. So we're really excited for all of the students to be able to go and have this opportunity. So I'm going to introduce my students. I have 3 of the 4 of them here today. We have, oh my goodness, I'm going to blank on your last name, Blake Miller. Oh my goodness. I'm like a dance mom right now. I'm a little nervous. But Blake Miller, Caitlin Kemp-Shuckwit, and Chelsea Tanner. Their co-author, Mike Hamilton, couldn't be here today, but they're going to be presenting on their paper, Attitudes and Perceptions of Drug Behaviors. Come on up. The very bottom left.
Well, thank you, Dr. Meyer, and thank you, everyone, for being here today. We are very, very excited about this opportunity, and any feedback that you have for us would be greatly, greatly appreciated. As Dr. Meyer had said, we were in COM 210 last semester, and when she gave us the topic of risky behaviors, immediately our group started going to the texting and driving, security settings on Facebook, false identification use. And kind of as a whole, we wanted to go a little bit farther and step out of our comfort zone. And that's when the topic of drug abuse came up. So, drug abuse, how can we make that into a communication research study? So we started thinking about the media and how usually the drug dealer is a sketchy, hooded, sly, negative, violent character, and it's all a negative portrayal. And then recently, there's been media portraying a positive spin on that and not so sly, hooded figures. So that kind of brought us to the purpose of our research project, which is the purpose of this research study is to examine the relationships between drug behavior that is portrayed in the media and then society's attitudes, beliefs, and or perceptions of drug behaviors. So I'm going to go ahead and give it to Blake as he'll talk about the theory we used.
Okay, so we were thinking about what theory we were going to use. We went to our COM 209 book, kind of flipped through it. It's a good resource. And we were just trying to figure out, okay, what would actually make sense with this? We went through a lot of different ones, and finally we hit Cultivation theory by Gardner. And what this theory actually examines is just going to examine the long-term effects of your exposure to media and how this can actually alter our perceptions, okay? And Gardner focused a lot on violence and how this can actually change our perceptions of our own life, violence, how we experience it in our own life, and then violence in the actual real world. And then there's some other focuses, which would be marriage, how we can kind of view marriage after watching TV shows. Smoking, this was focusing a lot on advertisements, how smoking can kind of change, the smoking advertisements can make us want to smoke or not smoke. And then the last one was political views. So drugs in this study, we defined it as a casual use of a prescription drug, a use of illegal narcotics or any other substance that can have some type of physiological effect. And then drug behavior is our first variable we were going to look at. Okay, we have 2 variables. The first one is drug behavior. So this was any type of situation that involves using, making, buying, or distributing these drugs. The second variable would be media exposure. And this is going to look at the media you're watching, how long you're going to look at it, and then how this can actually affect us. So the frequency, how often are you watching this particular media or looking at Facebook or whatever media we're looking at? The recency, did you just look at it or how long was it been? And then the vividness, how much can you recall from this particular media that you were looking at? So like Caitlin said, the media is kind of taking a different spin on different drugs and drug behavior. So we were focusing on these 2 shows, Breaking Bad, which is looking at a professor or a teacher at a high school who starts manufacturing meth and selling it to pay for his cancer treatments. So this kind of gives us a different outlook. It's not someone who's just doing it just to get some money so they can buy more drugs. It's someone who's trying to help himself and better his life. And then Weeds is focusing on a single mother who is selling drugs to pay for her family's, security. So our hypothesis was people who watch shows with this type of drug behavior can actually have a more positive outlook on drug behaviors, okay? And then our research question is, does the viewership of these particular shows, does this alter and change our perceptions and attitudes? So now I'm going to give it to Chelsea, and she's going to talk a little bit about how we kind of conducted our research and how we kind of delved into this.
Okay, so to conduct our research today, we actually created a survey using Google, and we shared our survey on Facebook and our Twitter, as well as asked our followers and friends on Facebook and Twitter to share the survey with their friends and followers, just to get as many people piggybacking onto our survey as possible. In the end, we had 317 participants, 69% which were female, 31% which identified as male, and 1% which identified themselves as other. Okay, and for the survey, we actually had participants, we asked them questions about how often they watch the shows on a scale of 1 to 6, which 1 being never, 6 being always, and questions about how they felt about drug behavior in general, as well as on television. We actually used a variety of television shows. Like Caitlin said, we were trying to hide the fact that we were looking at our treatment groups were Breaking Bad and Weeds. So we kind of snuck those two in there with a bunch of other ones. Little did we know, we titled our survey Attitudes and Perceptions of Drug Behavior. So when so on Facebook, when you went to go take our lovely survey, you knew exactly what we were looking for. So it's a learning experience, so next time, maybe not title it that. Okay, and then the data was actually run through SPSS, and in the end, we actually found that the genres of television shows did not directly correlate with how you feel about drugs behavior in general or on television. One of our treatment groups was Weeds, and we actually found that show did support our hypothesis. Participants who watched more Weeds had a more positive view of drug behavior on television. However, Breaking Bad did not support our hypothesis. This could be because it was a more violent show, but the significant relationship between viewership was that, there was no significant relationship between Breaking Bad and the viewership of their attitudes. The Voice, Fox News, and American Idol, we actually found that the participants who had watched these shows actually had a less positive view of drug behavior on television. The Voice and American Idol, those are quote-unquote reality shows, and then Fox News being a real news television show. For further research, we could look into the connection between reality television and perceptions of drug behavior. One that we really found interesting was SportsCenter. We found that SportsCenter, or people who had watched more SportsCenter, had a more positive view of drug behavior on television. So knowing this, we decided to run a follow-up t-test to describe or find the difference between male and female viewership, and we actually did find a significant difference between men and women who watched SportsCenter. Men had actually watched more SportsCenter than women, as you might have guessed. So knowing this information, we decided to run an overall t-test comparing men and women throughout all the genres, and we actually found that men overall had a more positive view of drug behavior on television than women did. And now I'm going to let Caitlin talk to you about limitations in future research.
Thank you. Yes, so limitations in future research. Every study is going to have different ideas of what you could have done better and certain implications that occurred. So first of all, time, because this study was conducted during a semester, we felt that meeting our deadlines and finishing the project was more of a priority than actually allowing the amount of time that was needed for each step. In the future, we would like to lengthen our timeline and see how much time and energy each step takes to really grab the most out of every step that we can. We also had the limitation of a demographic. We all are students at the same university and we share many of the same networks. So we were not able to generalize our results over a wide spectrum of people. In the future, we would like to definitely expand our demographic, specifically in location as well as age range. there's always the discussion versus quantitative versus qualitative data, as Dr. Meyer had mentioned. We did use quantitative data, but we kind of started discussing about what would have happened if we would have used qualitative data. We definitely would conduct focus groups and interviews and really look about how each of our participants feel about the character. Does it have to do with just the actor, or does the character change from a negative view to a positive view? How do they really feel about that character's emotions? And I think that could make a really interesting discovery in the future. Last but not least, the most important was our survey construction. We were learning about social desirability in class. And so we were like, we're going to be great students, and we are going to disguise this, and no one will know what we want them to answer. And then our mistake of the title. So in the future, definitely, I think with the time limit too, we had a priority and we just wanted to bust through the survey. So in the future, we also want to narrow down the television shows, as well as really just getting straight to the point and just asking about drug behavior, and seeing maybe even the shock of them being so taken back that we're just asking about drug behavior, I think could be very interesting as well. So we definitely have a little bit of a flawed research study, but we've enjoyed every aspect of it. And thank you all again. We really will appreciate any feedback. Thank you, Dr. Wall and the communication department for sending us on this trip. And we are going to represent Missouri State very well. We'd like to thank Dr. Meyer for being such an amazing mentor through this whole process. We couldn't have done it without her. And all of you for attending today. And I think we're going to open the floor for questions.
Were those shows actually in season when you did this? Breaking Bad, I know, ended, but did it end
Right.
last
When we
semester?
started, Breaking Bad was in season.
It was in
and Weeds, I don't think was actually in season at the time.
Okay.
But a lot of the shows we used were like sitcoms and like daytime television as well as nighttime television. So I think those were all like running, and then some of the sitcoms were probably in syndication. But I know Breaking Bad had not ended at that point. It was like whenever it was coming down to the end and everyone was really excited about it. So that kind of like stimulated our interest in it as well.
Yeah.
We actually made a list of genres first, and then filled in the TV shows, so we kind of had an equal playing field.
First, let me say this is really wonderful research, not just for undergraduates, but I've been to a million conferences where all people are not doing things. So, congratulations to all of you.
Thank you.
A question that I might have is there a way for you to discuss the distinction between the portrayal of the drug user or the drug seller and the portrayal of motivations for selling or using the drug? For example, you say that there's a more positive view of drug usership on Weeds, and maybe that's because she's trying to support a family, spoiler alert by the way, by selling drugs. Maybe not true on Breaking Bad. So is there a way to distinguish between perceptions of the user-seller and perceptions of the motive for user-seller?
Whenever we were talking about, we would like to further our research and kind of delve more into it, and so we were really looking into how can we further, because drug behavior is really a broad term, and then looking at different aspects of drug behavior, we were really talking about, the interviewing part was so we could delve further into why they think this, and so we can kind of get a little more, and so that is actually very interesting, having a motive portrayal. So.
And we'd like to assume that that's why Breaking Bad viewership, or they have a more positive attitude toward drug behavior, is because it's a less, domineering character, and she is doing it less because Walter White kind of turns bad in the end. Spoiler alert.
Right.
But I would love to find a way to figure out if we could distinguish between the character portrayal and the morals compared to people's.
Well, and also Chelsea had mentioned, part of our future research would be looking into reality TV. And these shows are scripted, so is the motivation really a true motivation? Where on reality TV, those are true emotions and true motivations, whereas on scripted, it's what are the people going to like? So it's also maybe comparing reality TV to written.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about, you asked about how often they watch the shows, and I was curious. I mean, as I talk to students, I get the perception I watch way more TV than they do. It's just a thing about me, but that they're not watching a lot of TV. So did you have any results associated with viewership? Like how many hours a week they're watching? Or how
I
often?
think it was between, was it 1 and 6, then towards 35 hours and up was our range of what we did, but then also a lot of the shows that we had put on there were actually offered on Netflix. So we didn't take that into account as well, which could be another question, like, are you watching these on television versus Netflix? So that would be something to go into, because I know a lot of college students don't even have cable, we just watch everything on Netflix. So that would be something else to consider. But we didn't really compare, I guess, solely the hours they watched compared to it, but we just kind of compared the shows to their answers on their drug behavior, so.
It may also be amount of time they spend.
Yeah.
Right.
But then that is an interesting issue about maybe you're getting saturated
Mm-hmm.
with the weeds.
Mhm.
If you're watching all of the shows at once, it may relate to sort of an oversaturation about that compared to if I'm just watching it once a week or even though it's on my own time, I'm DVRing it, you know, I can watch it at my own time, but I wonder about that.
Yeah.
Blake, do you want to talk a little bit about what our initial plan was, the experiment we were planning to do,
Yeah.
and why we weren't going to do it?
Initially, we wanted to do, we had people sit down and we were going to do a pre-survey, let them watch the show, and do a post-survey. The cultivation theory, Gardner states specifically in the beginning, it happens over a longevity of time. So we were thinking about going back, and if we were going to do that, doing it over a period of weeks and months rather than just doing it at one set time. So that was the initial thought behind it, but then we looked more into the research, we're like, we should probably not do that.
Well, the complications of finding somebody, do we want to limit the participants to someone who has never seen Breaking Bad? Or because someone who has never seen Breaking Bad and did the study, for someone who was just kind of almost playing along because they had seen it, was one of the issues that we were running into.
I just want to echo, very good job. This is really well done.
Thank you.
One thing, this is just more of a suggestion, when you talk about your limitations in future research, be sure not to sell yourself short. I think you guys did a really nice job, and then you got to the end and you said, well, there was the question of quantitative or qualitative. I think you absolutely made the right choice for I mean, don't sell yourself short there. I think one way, like you said, to talk about future research, and this might just be the way that you were talking about it today, but to talk about future research, I think focus groups would absolutely make sense. I'm not sure about interviews, just the way that you talked about, I think that would take you in a different, you know, to do an individual interview would be a very different, but I think focus groups absolutely make sense. And just make sure you talk about that in terms of, this is how we would expand. It's not a
Right.
limitation by any means of your research.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I just wanted to, just real quick, I wanted to agree with Kelly because I have 2 college students that have just Netflix.
Yeah.
And they'll do that, they'll sit and they'll watch like 3 seasons of Weeds, you know, over the course of a month, and that's pretty much all they'll watch in between doing homework and stuff, so I think that it's kind of maybe a concern.
Yeah, I think so too, and I'm surprised that we didn't really put that on the survey, because we were all talking about, oh, I'm watching Breaking Bad on Netflix, I'm catching up, and we actually never really thought about, oh, maybe we should ask them if they're watching it on Netflix, but yeah, I definitely want to look into that in the future as well.
Great.
Thank you.
I thought what was really interesting that came out of this was that Sports Center finding, and that the people who watch Sports Center have more positive attitudes. So do you guys have any thoughts? I know we talked about the gender difference, and we found out that men do in fact have more positive views of drug behavior than women, but do you guys have any ideas of what some other things might be that could be contributing to that result?
As far as Sports Center, like why they have a significant.
This goes back to the gender thing, but I know a lot of like guys that will just sit around and just put Sports Center on when there's nothing going on, just watch the news and stuff. So I know that's back to the gender effect, but I know that people always have Sports Center on when they go into their houses. So I don't know if they're doing drugs and watching Sports Center or if it's just on in the background. But I don't really have any idea, like without the gender factor. Do you like?
Well, another thought when you asked that is that with Sports Center, thinking of like what is being shown on Sports Center. I mean, there's a lot of stories about athletes and drugs, and you know what their limitations are, and who was the athlete that got tested, and things like that. And I don't know if it really, because it's portrayed on Sports Center as a negative thing, but it is almost slightly a rarity because they're trying to not have it. So maybe somehow that interaction with the idea of athletes should not do drugs has a factor.
Yeah, well, in the way that you define drug use and the way that you measure that that could be doping could be one of the things, and it's a contentious issue, yeah, and a lot of the media says, no, you shouldn't do it, but there are a lot of people that hold the opinion that it's okay to do
Right,
it.
well, and if
Because
they're,
everybody's doing it.
right, and if their favorite athlete, you know, was tested and, you know, was caught, they're gonna be a little disappointed because they're not gonna see him playing in the game, so, I would be.
Yeah, this is an interesting conversation. I want to suggest kind of an alternative explanation to the one you've just given, and go back to what Dr. Wood said about saturation, which is, I think you're right, for the people that just sit around and watch SportsCenter all day, myself included, minus the drugs. That the problem is when you do hear about drug use in sports, that's all you hear about on SportsCenter for weeks on end. And so I think for the same reason the people that might be sitting around and watching Weeds and Breaking Bad all the time and become desensitized to the issue of drug use, I think that the SportsCenter explanation is just as likely because of saturation, because we get tired of hearing it and it seems so prevalent that for the people that watch SportsCenter, they've written it off.
Yeah.
It's just a thing.
Right.
Yeah. So that might be an explanation of this gender problem that Dr. Myers raised. Yeah.